Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I called a meeting to order for the Fairway Planning Commission for Monday, October 25th, 2021. First item on the agenda is approval of last month's meeting minutes from September 27th, 2021. Can I get a motion from the commission or any objections to the posted meeting minutes?
I'd motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Approved. Move forward. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, moving on. Old business. We have a facade material upgrade for 5869 Fontana Drive. This was submitted by Caleb George of Chris George Homes, property owner, last month's meeting. This is a holdover for this month's meeting. Is there staff, do we have an update on this, or would you like to give your report and recommendations?
Yes, so as far as the report, the Planning Commission approved the application with the stipulation regarding the facade on September 27. The applicant is proposing engineered wood siding board and changing it to a hardy lap siding on the gable. So he's engineered wood and some changes as far as lap siding addition.
Okay. Is there any questions for the staff from the Planning Commission? Okay, if no questions, would the applicant like to speak regarding? Could you please state your name and address for the record?
Caleb George, 6830 Beverly, Overland Park, Kansas, 66204. So we try to take the Planning Commission's comments to heart, but at the same point, keeping kind of the homeowner desired finishes for this new construction home. We did go back in and we subtracted out any of the cedar shake, which I think was just in 2 gables, and we added in lap siding in additional gables, and added some additional detail and notes on there, just to kind of bring some more architectural elements to light. There's a shed roof added to the pedestrian door on the garage side. A couple additional vents added to the gables to bring some cohesiveness to the design. Some additional standing seam roofing elements added to the sides. And again, overall, reduce the amount of board and batten, which I know was a concern from the commission, to hopefully a fair level where it's still not too many things happening, but kind of that desired California ranch house that we were going for appearance.
Okay. Is there any questions for the applicant from the commission? Okay, thank you.
Actually, I just have one quick question, not related to the design, but since I live in that neighborhood, I was curious about the hole. I saw the fence fell in, and the neighbor's property is at risk maybe at this point, or how's that going?
Oh, it's going fine. The fence, we did have some slough off with rain from the hole, and fairly normal. We were pretty close to the property line. Thankfully, it was our fence, and the neighbor was understanding. So we have a temporary fence up there now, and we will go back in with the permanent fence when we're all backfilled up. But yeah, it looked worse than it probably was. So I think that the neighbor, we've been in touch with them, and they've been really easy to deal with, thankfully. So yeah, that should be all resolved, or will be resolved with the permanent fence once we're able to backfill it.
Great, thanks.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. Kim, do I need to open this up for public comment since old business, or just continue? Okay. Okay. So discussion amongst the commission, comments, questions, concerns? Yeah, I would like to thank the applicant for taking under advisement the commission's recommendations and appreciate the further detail that you guys did put into this. I know it was a little bit of a bump in the road, but we do appreciate you guys, so thank you. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion passes. All right, new business. This evening, we've got a site plan before us for exception to the green space requirements for 5818 Almonte Street, submitted by Chance Scarlett of the Greensman on behalf of the Bear Family Trust property owner. Can we get a staff's recommendations and report findings, please?
Okay, the background, this house was built in 2019. As far as the numbers and the numbers will be different, and I will send the corrections. We had some discussion, and the owner and the contractor gave us different numbers, so nobody was in agreement. But the required is 9847.5, which is 65%. The existing is 9863.5, which puts them at 65.2 for green space. The proposed is 9404.5, which is at 62.2%. So they are over 442 with 2.9% over the green space requirement.
Okay. And for clarification for staff, what was it, you mentioned a discrepancy, you couldn't agree to numbers. Is that a discrepancy that was discovered, or what?
Well, you sent us an email, and then when we checked back, we were basing it on a letter that the applicant sent us with the numbers as
Okay.
far as what they were taking out and what they're proposing. So
Okay.
that did not match the plans they submitted. So
Okay.
that's where the numbers were
Gotcha. So
off.
for the commission standpoint too, I guess we've got an application before us for exception, but we don't have we have what we believe are the accurate numbers. We haven't confirmed that with the applicant, correct?
That's right. So our last number, they are 442 square feet over the green space requirement, which is at 2.9%.
Thank you.
Over the requirement. The staff does not support the request. Last week, I did talk to the applicant. He indicated that he and the owner will show up, but then he did say there's a good chance they're not gonna proceed with the project, even though they started it. It's about 50% done. We issued a stop work order. So at this point, I don't see the applicant present, so
Would they be present online perhaps?
no. I mean, they were
We're not doing online?
notified it's in person.
Okay.
It's all in person unless one of our, commissioners needs to zoom in.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from the commission to staff?
So just to make sure I understand, you noticed they were doing some work? and-
We got a complaint, so we went out to the site, when we noticed that. So we issued a stop work, told them, we did the initial numbers, they said, and we told them they are exceeding the green space requirement. They only had 16 square feet to start with.
Got it. And this is mostly because they're taking out some cement, but putting in additional flagstone?
That's right. So we did have some correspondent, the engineer that did the watershed analysis did say that nothing has changed, but he's not taking into account the green space requirement. He's just taking it pervious and impervious.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just curious, they've done a great job with their landscaping and.
And it's still
so
there?
Well, the landscaping part is all permeable, but, anyway, I don't know, I think they got a beautiful house, so.
I don't think there's anything really to consider. I think we just deny it.
Okay, Commissioner Deacons, is there any other further discussion?
I guess I had a question on permeable versus like non-permeable space. Is like is brickwork like that considered permeable or not?
So, if I may,
Yeah.
the code is kind of twofold. It says permeable and then uncovered, and then also there's capable of supporting vegetation. So, for example, that's why we included the email, the stones over gravel with chip joints, no need for report. That is hardscape in terms of our definition, because you're not gonna be able to plant vegetation.
Oh, yeah, totally agree on the green
And
space
so
side.
brick walkways, while they may be laid right over, a compact dirt base, they're considered, non-permeable. We actually also, if you'll notice on the plans, the big pavers, that they used, any dimension less than 4 foot in any width or vertical, so those space between the pavers also don't count because it's so negligible,
Yeah,
so.
that's kind of what I figured. I agree that their landscaping is quite good, so I'm not horribly, the green space, I feel like they would do good with what they had, but, I guess the stormwater report or the watershed report kind of rubbed me the wrong way, that they're saying it doesn't impact it, but it seems like they're installing a considerable amount of not very permeable space. But I'm not a stormwater expert, so.
Any other further discussion? We'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we deny the plan as submitted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the motion's to deny. All right. Next discussion on new business is the discussion of solar panels. Staff, do we have an update on this, or how do we want to proceed forward with this discussion?
So this wasn't in the packet, I apologize, I couldn't get it, all the information, but currently, the city has no regulations on solar panels. We have, in the last couple of years, issued a few, maybe 3, 4 tops. Summer roof, one is freestanding on the ground. But we do get calls pretty frequently, and so we probably need to take an opportunity to, from the commission, get some input and direction on what you'd like us to, put in the language. What I included is from zoning council Kirstelich. She also serves on Mission Hills, so they drafted language that's been approved. I pulled Prairie Village. Roland Park just recently passed some regulations, so we pulled it. And then I pulled Merriam, not because they're right adjacent to us or anything, but they had some other language. They do also have some commercial. We have not really gotten, to my knowledge, any inquiries on solar panels for commercial buildings. But some of the considerations in what the Planning Commission might like to see in language is, and the first is, Fairway's the city of trees. And one of staff's questions is, are solar systems viable, compatible with residential neighborhoods that have mature tree canopies? I've done a personal, on my own home, shade analysis, and you'll find sometimes you have I mean, my house faces the west, I have no trees, but the trees from the south and east pretty much shade my whole ranch house. And so I had a very small portion when they do an analysis. And, you know, so one of the questions from staff is, are solar energy systems compatible with the neighborhood? If someone decides they want to pursue something like this, which I think it's great and interesting, but if the city only regulates the right-of-way trees, if they remove all the trees in their backyard, is that compatible to the character of the neighborhood? As I mentioned before, there's roof-mounted and freestanding. One of the ones we did issue a permit for was freestanding. Initially, the property owner came in and got, you know, one, and we treated it as a accessory structure because we had no rules, so in terms of setbacks and everything. Didn't get any complaints on it, but we were kind of like, wonder. Then he came back and added to it, and then that's when the neighbor complained. It's like, you know, I'm looking out at a solar field next to me. So, you know, in some of these cities, they just out and out prohibit the freestanding. Most of them on the roof mounted, they're looking at panels that are pretty much flush to the system, and if they have to tilt them to get the right angle, I think the max I saw was 12 inches in the language that they can be above the roof line. One also brought up an interesting point of glare. Depending on elevations of houses, could that cause glare to a neighbor? There are also the solar shingles. I did some Googling on that. Tesla has them. There is another one. Was it Certainty that came out with it? There is another big company that has them in like the tile and sort of shake. They aren't real, they're going to stand out against the other roofing materials. So if you have a tile or something and you do a portion, they are going to stand out. So I'm thinking from the front street view, most of the cities say it can't be visible from the public right-of-way, so that's going to eliminate any systems that are mounted on the roof that are visible from the front of the house. You know, down the road with development, could they develop shingles that look like in different colors where, right, what I saw is it's like the shingle's black, and then if you have clay tile, then you've got the red clay tile. So it's pretty obvious. And so maybe it's treated almost like we treat other roofing materials, an accessory amount. You could have an accessory amount of it, not to exceed 20%, unless they have something that blends in substantially with the others. But if we were to consider shingles, that I think has to be either an approved material or they could seek an exception from planning. On the freestanding, again, most of the cities don't seem to offer it, but if they do, they're regulating how much square footage, height. Most of them, it looked like in just perusing it, is 8 foot. Now that's going to be above a 6-foot fence. And again, depending on, you know, the terrain, it might be very visible to you, a neighbor, if you're elevated higher than the person that puts in the freestanding. Is it any different than a kid's playground equipment that, you know, they can put in? But, you know, we would want to consider maybe certain setbacks from the front, the rear, possibly glare on that. So there's a lot of things that I thought maybe we needed the Planning Commission to give some input on, and before we start drafting language.
I guess my question would be in this situation where Prairie Village allows this and Kansas City, I know, allows this, has there been any issues with people just clear cutting their properties to increase the efficiency of their solar panels?
No, We have not had
Not
that.
been an issue?
Not yet.
So I think, a lot of times these are most effective if there's a slope. If you live on a slope facing the south, that's where I've seen most of them. And what about putting in some language where the proponent would have to get the approval of, say, neighbors within a certain circumference of their front door or something, or the next door neighbor or something, so there's some control over that?
There are cities that have historically done that with like fences and those sort of things. I think I would, as a staff, rather have some clear-cut language that can be problematic. It can be problematic with fences. Fences are one of our number one, it raises the angst of neighbors, probably more complaints on that. So, and then I think about, well, down the road, if, your neighbor changes, obviously someone moving in they can see it, they know it exists, therefore, if I choose to buy a house there, I'm accepting this condition.
Yeah, because I guess my concern would be if somebody buys the house to the south of you and then clears all the trees, that's gonna affect, because the way the sun is, it's gonna affect the house to the north because they're not gonna have the shade
And we
of
have
the
had,
neighboring trees.
that is
Yeah, so
exactly true, and we
incentivizing that.
have had some of those complaints when someone has planted a shade garden, and the unfortunate thing is, the private trees we do not regulate, and in this case, an owner was trying to protect their property from some diseased and dying limbs. What they did was they just went in and really thinned it out, but it made the neighbor very upset. At some point, you do have to draw the property line and note to them, but I could see, just having been in the glass business, glare could be really detrimental. I hadn't thought of that till I read it in one of the requirements.
And if I could just jump in too for a moment, it would likely, the neighbors would get notice through the site plan review process. So that's something to consider
Well,
as well.
If we
If,
make it a hearing
Right.
item,
Right.
yeah. Just for clarification, especially some of you that are new on the board, when planning's considering exceptions, no notifications are going out on those. It's written in the code that you as the body can consider if it, under the criteria, you want to approve it.
I guess I'm in favor of renewable resources, I think with parameters and limitations of what we can do. I think that this is a good start in identifying an outline for some things that are important. Kim brings up a few good points. If you were to invest in a property and install solar panels on, say, the south side, who's to say 3 to 5 years from now, the neighbor's not going to plant trees and they're going to be impeding on your solar easement or something like that you could potentially, is that such a thing, Anna, solar easements in the state of Kansas?
I'm not familiar with the concept, but I know that there are such things as air rights, and so yes, I think that that's definitely a possibility, but I'd need to look into it.
I know there's some legislature or something in the House with this Missouri that speaks to some of that. And actually, I believe Missouri, if I could you could correct me on this, but Missouri actually prohibits certain HOAs and other things and governing bodies from making exceptions for that stuff, and it makes it say if you want solar, you can have it. Is that correct?
I don't know that law off the top of my head, but again, this is something I could definitely check for the next meeting.
The concern with canopy would be a concern is, we are the city of trees. City has jurisdiction over the right-of-way trees, which is, remind us, that's 12 foot behind curb?
Yes, within 12 foot back from the
Right.
curb. The city owns those and maintains them.
Right.
And certainly, when you drive down some streets, it is very, I mean, it's lovely. It's very shady in the summer. And I suppose a lot of properties, it's simply not going to be feasible for them to do it.
Right.
And I did find, I think one of them, it was interesting, I think they had to provide a shade analysis. And if they didn't meet, if it was above a certain threshold, they wouldn't even let them do it because it's like you really have too much shade to do anything. So,
Yeah, and then you have to balance the energy cost of, cooling your house in the summer. You've got solar panels, but you don't have the shade. So-
exactly. And I know one of the and I could certainly pull one of the summaries we did. I think we did it in 2007 and 2017. We had Kim Baumberger from the state come and do kind of an analysis of all the trees, an inventory of the trees in the city of Fairway, and that factor, the cooling factor that they provide in the summer.
So I guess what I'm hearing is that it sounds like we're entertaining of renewable energy resources of solar. Is that, and we need to just develop an outline on, maybe more specifically on, let's talk about,
And one thing what we noticed too, they are including the geothermal too, which again, we don't have any language on.
and I saw that, I also saw wind energy. And I think it was Commissioner Deacon, did you bring up last time about the battery installations?
That was
No, that was Mr.
Bukowski, yeah.
Bukowski, yeah.
Okay.
And I did do a little research on that and seemed like, from what I was looking, and maybe I didn't have the right name for it, but those are pretty compact and can be almost very flush against the building.
They can be, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. I was doing some research as well, at least poking through various California cities and seeing what codes they had, and a lot of it came down to capacity requirements and where is it, inside or outside, right? So you can have more outside. To your solar easements point, Prairie Village has a section in their code about solar easements.
Right.
But negotiated between the neighbors only.
Right, which comes into, how does that get established? Is it a deed restriction, or how is it recorded? And we could work through all that stuff with legal to figure out how we're gonna do it, but, I just envision of, if I bought a parcel and I knew that I had, at the time, a good sun score and I could get solar, 10 years down the road when I'm trying to recoup that investment, if my neighbors planted trees adjacent to me and suddenly those are impacting, that's, wasn't there at the time, it is. It's again, we're the city of trees, so we've got to kind of establish some boundaries so we're not dealing with this 10 years from now.
Yeah, you could buy an easement from your neighbor, I guess, to not plant trees or something to
Sure.
keep it clear. And then
Conveyed through
when
deed
they
restriction.
sell their house, then their property's burdened with that easement and your property's benefited from that easement. But again, maybe the person who buys your house doesn't want solar, maybe they want shade. So it's
Right.
kind of hard. It's kind of a tricky thing to figure out, but.
Yeah, in my mind, I think it would be pretty hard to control your neighbor's property because you want solar.
Right.
It's sort of one of those things that you just take the gamble and hope that,
Right.
you can work out a deal with your neighbor that they don't plant a tree, but I don't think it's appropriate to control what your neighbor can plant or can't or anything of that sort.
Yeah, and I just agree with you, anything we can do to, enhance renewable energy use, great, but knowing our constraints, I personally think that the Mission Hills draft language meets all of the concerns I would have in terms of it eliminates the freestanding structures and provides at least some guidelines at a higher level than a couple of the others that are a little more detailed. And it would at least require a permit then that staff could review and start to garner more information in terms of, because right now they're going up without a permit, right? Unless,
No, they do have to have a permit.
Okay.
Because there's generally, there's electric involved, so you got to pull the permit for that. But
but you're
beyond.
not necessarily reviewing it for more than that, right?
Not
'Cause
really.
There's nothing to review against.
And on the freestanding one, we probably took, we simply treated it as an accessory structure.
Yeah,
not a building, but a structure, kind of like a play gym or something in terms of getting it set back and everything.
I mean, they do have a transfer switch, so whether you wanna put it outside or inside, you never know. My neighbor built one, and you drive and it's all there on the side of his house. You'll see the piping, and I think one of the municipalities, they request concealment of the piping and the metal. But I mean, it's pretty exposed there, because they come from the attic down to the side of the house. They have 2 or 3 transfer switch and another shut off and go into the main panel.
Basil brought up an interesting point also this afternoon as we were discussing, but roof replacement on the ones that are mounted on the roof. You know, do you make a consideration if someone's contemplating solar that their roof is at least within a certain number of years new? You know, it was an interesting thought, you know.
And you'll gain, the roof won't be deteriorating as fast, but again, if the roof is 10, 15-year-old,
I think what I think what I read on the solar systems are most somewhere in the, between 10 and 15-year life. Does that sound right, or is it 15 and 20?
It's like 15 to 25,
Fif-
yeah.
50, which on a new roof is right in line with the new roof.
They make those things where they're removable sections, you can replace the roof beneath them. The contractors come out, remove the solar panels, and they replace the roof. They
Okay.
usually sit on a stand that's offset from the roof by, anywhere from 6 inches to 10 inches off the roof.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing is we're not in favor of freestanding solar panels. Is that an accurate statement? I'm just writing down some trigger words here. Concealment of the apparatus and the infrastructure that goes to and from the solar panels, to neat manner, I guess, is another concern of what I'm hearing. I'm just trying to summarize what you guys are talking about too.
What about any thoughts on the solar shingles? If someone's as an accent material, any thoughts?
I have a hard time saying no to that, given just, I guess, how diverse roofing materials can be in general. I understand that there's like a bit of a shine to them, but of all the products, it seems the least obtrusive. Like,
Right.
So would that be something like on the front then, if it's blending in with the style and all? Or would you want some exception language like, I mean, we actually have exception language already there, that if someone wants to pursue it, they come to planning. We can just leave that like that.
I mean, this one language in one of these is, all parts of the solar energy system shall be in general conformity with the building to which the system is attached. That leaves you a lot of gray space that you will, that you would have to then pitch to us, right? And
Yeah.
so if the staff isn't like confident,
Yeah,
it's gonna come here and we can figure
Okay.
it out. I
Okay.
don't know if is that good? Is that too vague?
no, because we, on roofing materials, we specifically call out. And if someone's bringing in a solar shingle, and just, I haven't seen that many, but I can tell they're different, I'm gonna be inclined to say, this doesn't meet our roofing materials, you're gonna have to go to planning for an exception. I'm fine with that. And I didn't finish, I had other thoughts, but also, I think Council Kirstelich brought up, where do you want to put this in the code? And do we also want to consider, not that we have a lot of commercial, but language for that? You know, something mounted up on hen house might not even be visible on the flat roof.
I feel like that's a totally different ball game there. Like a residential installation versus a commercial, especially on a flat roof, like something flat. I'm more inclined to be like, do as much as you want, right? It seems like it's in the benefit.
Yeah, I think I'd be much more liberal with businesses, especially if it's below a lot of times they have a parapet, you can't see their communications equipment or whatever, so.
Keyword to me is non-visible, right?
Right.
If it's non-visible, do what you want.
So in the commercial section, we could have something about if it's not visible, then it could go through the proper procedures. If it was visible, then it would need to come through planning commission for approval. There are some restaurants, I think of like the Sam Fox Restaurant Concepts, True Foods. You know, they got a local establishment down in the plaza, but they've got other standalone locations if you go and visit. And their thing is they like to show that. It's like they've got solar panels and you can see them. The arrays built in as part of the structure and you can see it. And they advertise that, right? So there's restaurant concepts and other commercial buildings that kind of want to promote that renewable kind of genre of, you know, whatever you want to call it, compliance or whatever. So, so I'm hearing that we would want to see if it goes to commercial. John, is that?
I would agree.
Okay.
I think that, yeah, if it's not visible, do what you want, but if you want to have that kind of a concept in Fairway, that might be great, but we want to see it. Yeah, we want to
Sure.
talk about it.
Well, we've got this existing facility going on right now where the old chicken place was, and then we've got this other thing before us that this will potentially come up.
Yep.
So,
Would you want to have that same sort of fast-track process for residential properties where they weren't visible? I mean, not that it would be a common occurrence, but if somebody were to have the capability to put it to hide, I guess, the solar panel, maybe that, if that's the concern.
Well, on residential, I guess, I'm just thinking here, but I'm more inclined to give staff a little more autonomy to approve some if they're within our code.
So if it's not visible, and we have a few modern houses that literally that you don't see the roof profile at all because of the
Yeah.
way the roof's designed. So if we were to put some language that said that it's not visible from, you know, the,
Eye level at street or
Yeah.
something, yeah. Mhm.
we probably need to define that though, because if you're gonna say the right of way, I mean, if you're on a corner lot, for example, it might be visible from one side versus the other. So we
True.
kind of need to define
Yeah.
those parameters.
And, you know, or the backyard, is it visible to the backyard neighbors? Elevations are different, so
yeah.
it's a little
And
more tricky.
then, I guess I just asked a question I don't know the answer to, is, do we want to make them come here if they're trying to do this and they generally meet intent or not? I don't want to create a barrier that we don't have to create
Right.
for a positive, but I also think it's pretty gray in terms of how we give staff the direction there on what we do want you to approve or not. So that's just a comment, I guess.
I mean, I think it's still new enough that, you know, we could just, there's a possibility that it has to come to the planning commission for approval. You know, perhaps in 5 years, it'll be so mundane that it's no big deal. So there is that option if you want to evaluate it on a case-by-case basis with the different, I mean, the fact that we do have hilly areas, especially in Ward 3, some of the Golden Triangle, you know, it just slopes all the way down the street, so.
So you mentioned glare. Would there be a criteria that we could set that would control that as well? Because even if it's on a roof on a single-story ranch home with a two-story home next to it, you know, in the early morning, you could get a lot of glare into a bedroom or things of that sort that are
Yeah, and
upstairs.
now we're really getting beyond what I can Google. That's where I need the
Yeah.
engineers to say, well, at this
that
angle,
a
it's
case by
this. Yeah,
case?
I'm not capable of providing that. So out in your world, is there someone, an engineer or something that makes that analysis? I don't know, kind of like the watershed analysis we require. I'm not capable of doing that. I rely on an engineer's report.
They do glare analysis quite a bit, yeah, especially for like FAA, for like planes and stuff like that. At least we're doing a big job near Las Vegas right now, so they have a whole field full of them, so they do glare analysis.
Okay,
So
so.
that is a thing, I guess, is my point.
And
Kinda
so
like a
maybe that's a requirement, a glare analysis.
So Shay, it's like a photometric study, but it's done specifically for, it's a glare study, basically.
Right, especially when they get, you know, miles and miles of them, right? And you're near an airport,
Right.
those poor guys.
I suppose it would be something that could be easily modeled and animated throughout the year to see where the sun patterns would end up with the reflection off.
Right, I mean, I think there's plenty of professional modeling, I'm just not sure how much, like in the residential area, are you gonna get that sort of calculation? Sure, it's possible. I guess I would be
Maybe
more of
enough
the opinion that,
enough
at
direction.
least for now, a lot of these solar applications would come through the planning commission, just because it doesn't seem like we have a high volume of them at the moment. If we see that turning, then maybe we could come up with more specific language, but it seems like, especially with the visibility on the residential side, saying what's visible and what's not, and it's kind of I feel like it's hard to define, but.
Okay, so to address that, I guess, Kim, do we have a mechanism in place where if somebody were to bring this forth in the next 2 weeks to you guys, that you would be able to push it to commission, or is it something that you have to approve without commission? Do you have a mechanism in place to do that?
We don't have anything
Okay.
in place.
So it sounds like we need to get something in place.
Yeah.
Or make a motion this meeting to get something in place temporarily unless, if that's jumping the gun, you tell me, but.
Well, we will have to I have to notice a hearing for the draft ordinance, so I could get it noticed in time for the November meeting, which is the 29th. I could have up,
I only say that because you have to have the language available at City Hall, and I don't know that I could turn it that
Sure.
fast, because this is a pretty dense topic.
Okay.
Unless you're able to tell me, I like this.
Right, no, we're not ready
Yeah,
yet.
yeah, I don't think we're quite there yet,
No.
so.
We
But-
would want to see your draft language, I'm sure, before we approve it.
so
Okay.
between can they do some sort of moratorium that says we're not allowed to accept any solar panel applications?
I'd rather not.
Okay.
I think it's better just to stay silent. It hasn't been an issue to
Okay.
date, and if somebody were to want one in the meantime, you can just tell them, look, we're working on regulations. If you could just hold it until we get those in place.
Just hold the freestanding.
Yeah.
Submit geothermal, but again, I don't think it has a lot of issues, because
It's,
underground.
it's underground, and my parents have geothermal down south, and it's, all it is it involves some drilling, so the apparatus to come in and do it's a little noisy, but it's a superior system than what we have currently.
So I don't know how, and yeah, it goes into it, the ones I've seen, you go directly to the basement, you pour the
Yeah.
foundation wall. So there's nothing.
You don't have a DX, you don't have an air conditioning unit outside, they're nice. I'm less concerned with that, because it's hidden, and it's just a method they choose. More so, solar, sounds like wind, and maybe potentially these battery packs are localized.
And I think on the wind, pretty much that's gonna, some of the language we have on height restrictions is gonna make that not a viable thing, simply because, again, with the houses, the structures, the trees, I just don't know, and then the height restriction in residential. I had someone years and years ago ask about it, and I said, you can't put it up because they couldn't get it. It was gonna require going above a tree line and
Right.
stuff.
Valid point. So we're talking primary residence attached to, no accessory structures or other dwellings, not freestanding. Concealment of the infrastructure, supportive infrastructure, running to and from the panels. What were some other things you jotted down? Setbacks? Well, if it's setbacks on the house, it's part of the setback, right? Right. But can we make sure it says primary dwelling, because somebody might have like an ADU and then try to, you know what I mean? What else? Council Christoph, do you have any other thing, that you recommend?
I haven't studied the other cities' language just to compare and contrast and think through it completely yet. So I don't have any questions at this point, but I'm sure I will.
I did look
Is that enough to be dangerous?
Just to clarify, this would require a building permit, I'm assuming?
Yes, they do require a building permit. Even now, they require it.
Okay.
And even though we don't have any issues with geothermal, or are we still planning on, like, PV's language is fairly simple, I guess, unrestrictive. Are we still planning on addressing it in our code at least, just so it's been addressed?
And
Same
I'll
with wind.
piggyback a question onto your question. I've had one geothermal that was part of a new home construction that hit a lot of rock. I don't know how far they have to go down. I thought it was 100 feet or so. I don't know, would something like a soil analysis, because they drilled for 4 days solid and drove the neighbors crazy. Now, is that any different than someone else that hits rock? The other thing the city has a lot of is underground springs.
They case the wells, they prevent all that stuff from like backfilling into the stuff, so.
Okay,
It's a completely closed loop system.
okay, I didn't know.
Yeah.
So, all right,
Yeah, that's why I said the biggest thing about it is their drill rig, because they are really noisy. It's a short duration, but, so. But I think that definitely needs to be evaluated.
Just seems like if we're tackling all these now, maybe it's a good idea just to tackle them all at once and just have something in there, even if it's just saying it needs to get a building permit and.
Yep.
What about, we always gotta kind of also put the kind of a fence up for like the worst case. So who mentioned something about, well, if I'm a neighbor and I just decide I want to clear cut all the trees in my backyard because I want to put a solar system in, do we want to have minimal regulation, obviously government oversight of that stuff, but like, do we want to have some sort of mechanism in place that, certain size trees shouldn't be removed, or we are the city of trees, or Anna's looking at me like I'm crazy?
No, I really get where you're at. that's really tricky.
It's
Very,
hard to
very tricky.
police that. You get so specific. I think it's like, once if you're gonna actually go with this, then you have to kind of, to a certain extent, accept potential consequences of it, that people might cut down their trees, but, I don't know if they're gonna cut down all their trees, because they have self-interest in their property value too, and like you say, keeping how much solar energy they can produce by getting rid of all the trees versus the heating and cooling degree days are gonna incur, because they don't have trees anymore, so.
Yeah, good point.
Sometimes things are just kind of best left to let the people decide. I think that's probably one of them.
Very well put.
I do think we should have something on wind energy. I think it's very unlikely, but if one of those were to go up, and we didn't have anything to at least have them come here and talk about it. So,
It could come up on the commercial side too,
you're right. I was just kind of thinking about
the
the
business park.
business park property.
and I will say on the commercial side, anything they alter right now on the outside has to come
Come through,
for you
right.
guys, pretty much. I mean, aside from paint, it comes to you guys.
As far as the battery storage stuff, I guess if we want to dip into those waters, I guess I was just going through, like I said, reading some other cities worth and kind of was taking some notes. I guess in general, I had the question of, is that something that we want to allow on the exterior of the building? It's a thing, or do we want to force it to be inside? If so, are you going to put capacity requirements on it? The NEC has been updating itself lately quite a bit with a lot of these battery storage requirements. I think we have code to pull from. And then just in general, do we have requirements on what the storage container may look like, right? The Tesla Powerwall is pretty sleek, obviously, but there's plenty of other vendors out there and other ways to get that storage. Do you want to limit that? So that was kind of some of my notes I was taking down.
So, good point. I'm not familiar with those units. Can you describe a little bit more on, are those like a temporary solution if like there's a power outage? Are they fed but from the solar panels, or how does that work?
Yeah, so you can charge them from whatever source you want. It's a reasonably thin, fairly tall, kind of rectangular device. You can install it inside or outside. You can charge it from the grid, or you can charge it from your solar panels or your generator or whatever. A lot of the complaints, especially early on, was that the systems were kind of limited to 30-some kilowatt hours, which wasn't generally enough to power your house for a full day with all your loads. So I'm just kind of telling you what I've learned, I guess, reading through some of it. But yeah, it can charge itself from any direction. It's not just from the panels, right? So it can stay charged, power goes out, power stays on. So,
And I think I've seen the Tesla commercial run a lot, and they're always, it's very sleek, and they're showing it inside like a garage or something, you know.
a lot of the cities, well, California in general has, I believe it was in their California Fire Code, they just updated it in 2020 or 2021 to, like, it was limited to 40 kilowatt hours inside or 80 kilowatt hours outside, just because if they have problems, lithium ion likes to catch on fire, I'm sure, as we all know. So try to limit that. But there's other battery technologies out there that are getting better. Lithium ferrophosphate as well.
Yeah, makes sense. 5 years from now, I'm sure we'll see even more technology and the batteries will be even smaller.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm hearing that that's something else we want to maybe consider in the language. So, and what's the technical term for that? Battery
Battery storage.
storage,
Yeah.
okay.
And I think if you guys get stuck doing this, personally, I think keeping it a little more vague, if everything has to come here, we can just almost case by case it, to some extent, so, and then we'll figure that out, because I think you're right, I think we're gonna end up redoing these in about, well, who knows how long, but maybe not very long.
I feel like the battery, personally, I think the battery storage systems may become more ubiquitous than even the solar installations here, just because it provides an easy alternative to a generator, and you don't. It's fairly unobtrusive. So soon, I think that one may require some easy language that can be parsed out, I guess, that we don't have to review them all.
Yeah, if you can get people to stop using generators and switch to
Yeah, they're
batteries,
quiet.
that's,
Well, in the generators, I know we have a pad size limit, but when I saw those commercials for the battery storage outside, they don't even really need a pad, do they?
They mount on the wall. Yeah. Unless, of course, somebody gets fancy and tries to do something else, well, that is my only concern, is that someone tries to come in and do maybe a non-standard installation, so.
All good stuff.
Next meeting is the Monday after Thanksgiving,
Thank you. I was getting ready to ask when the next meeting is.
and they still have until Friday to turn in applications. Do we have any yet, Boz?
We have one submitted, we had some, they needed to do some correction. The facade issue,
Oh, okay.
and we have this green space calculation wrong. So, but he promised he can do it before this Friday. So we may have one.
So we'll have some hopefully draft language and then one application.
Excellent. So the next meeting date is Monday, November 29th. Okay. Last time any other discussion from the commission? Last time on the agenda is adjournment, and I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
all right.
Aye.
Thank you.